That's all. Thank you so much, Dr. McCarthy. Take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen and we can go ahead and get started. Okay, if you could just give me a thumbs up that you can see that, okay? All right, so this is early childhood mathematics, and this is session 1. So there are going to be, I think, 2 follow-up sessions. So today we're going to be talking about early childhood math. Okay, so let's just start by thinking about why is early childhood mathematics important? And one of the main reasons is that it is the best predictor of future success. And there's a video I can show you. Some of you might be familiar with it. The speaker is Doug Clements. He was a professor at the University of Buffalo. He's now at, I think, the University of Denver, and he's speaking at the White House. And he discusses why early childhood mathematics is so fundamental. So let's start with that video. Just gonna have to give me a minute to get everything, like stop share, new share. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and start it. If you can just let me know that you can hear it, and if you can't, unmute and let me know as well, okay? It's just about 4 minutes.
I have less than 5 minutes to tell you 5 ways that early mathematics is really surprising. First of all, it's surprising how deep and broad young children's thinking can be about mathematics. Take one example. Justin was asked, what's the biggest number, Justin, 5 or 8 or 6? And he said 8. And the interviewer was about to pass on, and he said, well, because 5 is like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 6 is one more here, and then for 8 you have to go 2 more. He not only knew the sequence of numbers, he had that number sense, that quantitative sense, multiple representations of these kind of numbers. Second, surprising, is how predictive early math is. Early math is, hands down, the best predictor of later school success in a variety of studies. It's shockingly predictive. Early math is cognitively fundamental. Third, this is a surprise to many educators. We need to support them. In one study, for example, educators were shown a subtraction problem and said, your preschool kids are ready for kindergarten now. Out of your class, how many kids could solve that problem? The average was 1. They thought maybe 1 kid could solve it. No, 10 could solve that problem. So when we underestimate what kids are capable of, how can we provide challenging but achievable kind of task for them? We need to up our game in how much we share with teachers and the support we provide for them. Fourth surprise, we know a lot about how to support kids' early learning, how it happens. We have developed, Julie Saram and I have developed learning trajectories with research-based kind of levels of thinking. Just like kids crawl before they walk, walk before they run, when you have a certain mathematical goal, there's steps you take to get there. And we understand those steps, the levels of thinking through which kids pass. When you plan curricula, activities, professional development, with teachers understanding those steps, then they can actually start where the child is and give them activities that'll help each child get to the next level of thinking. Fifth, not only do we find that if you follow these kind of learning trajectories, you get real serious gains in early mathematics learning and thinking, but it also generates transfer to other areas. For instance, we found in NSF and IES funded projects that not only do we get good gains in mathematics, but kids' oral language, separate from mathematics, grows as well. And we get transfer to self-regulation or executive function skills. So this is what we think is possible. Surprising things. Number 1, broad and deep mathematics. Number 2, it's amazingly predictive. Early math, kindergarten entry math, is the best predictor of whether kids finish high school and start college. Number 3, it's a surprise to too many educators. We have to educate them about what kids are capable of. Number 4, using learning trajectories is powerful. And 5, it transfers to language. So I'll end with one last story. Here's a kindergarten. His name was Andrew. I was interviewing him, see how much he had learned from our Building Blocks project. And he said, the question was, Andrew, you pretend you're on the telephone and you're talking to one of your friends and they don't know what a triangle is. And he said, doesn't know what a triangle was. And I said, yeah, if he didn't know what a triangle was, what would you tell him? And he looks at me and he says, does he know what a rhombus is? Nobody had asked me that before, so it kind of threw me. And I said, okay, he knows what a rhombus is. Then it's easy. Take the top of the rhombus, fold it on the bottom of the rhombus, and that'll make a triangle, he said. And, you know, he should put it up on his wall because he really should know what a triangle was. This was very, very... And I said, okay, Andrew, maybe. But what if you didn't know what a rhombus was? Okay. Take a piece of paper, I tell him. Start in the top of the middle of the paper and draw a line straight down to the middle of the side. And then another line to the middle of the bottom. And then another line. And I did what you're not supposed to do in a clinical interview. I stopped him and said, to draw a triangle? And he looked at me kind of disdainfully and said, no, to do a rhombus. Then he can do what I told him to do already. So he did what mathematicians love. He reduced the problem to a previously solved problem. And then, most importantly, he showed what we want to see, this kind of motivation and engagement in young children, because at the end he says, is this going to be on my report to my parents? Because I'm doing really good. So that's what we can see if we follow the research in early mathematics. Thanks.
All right, are we back on the PowerPoint? Nope. Okay, hang on. Always, right?
No, you're back. You're back. It just took a minute, I think.
I don't want to be there either. Okay. So are we on the PowerPoint? We're all good? Okay. So early childhood mathematics, fundamentally important. And I think it's also important to note from that video how it impacts oral language. So we really want to make sure that we're spending time and we're teaching mathematics in the early childhood classroom. So what might be some of our challenges to mathematics in the time of COVID? So we're going to have some students that come in with a wide range of abilities. They're going to have strengths, they're going to have gaps. We're going to have students with challenges in executive functions. Can they pay attention? Can they focus? Can they plan and organize in order to complete tasks? And then the last piece I put there was pacing guides. And I originally had standards and pacing guides, but I really don't think standards is the challenge. It's the guides that we get from our schools that tell us what we're supposed to be doing on what days and how quickly we're supposed to be moving. The challenge isn't the standards, those are fine. It's the pacing that would be the challenge. So today we're going to talk about some ways to help us with all of that. I wanted to start with some goals and visions and values for math this year. So I have a couple of mine there, not to panic about what they lack, but just to be slow and smooth and calm, finding strengths, working from the strengths. And I would say I'm doing this even in my college classroom. You know, with my college students, they're going to come in with some gaps and they're going to come in with some strengths, and I'm just slow, smooth, calm. So what I want you to do right now is think about your goal or your vision or your values for math this year and post it in the chat. Okay, so I'm reading some in there. Learning new strategies for the classroom, helping teachers become more confident, finding out what students need. All right. So let's see if we can find some things that will help you meet your goals for this year. So let's look at some of the math topics that we have to develop in early childhood. So there's sorting and classifying, spatial awareness, number sense, word problems, data literacy, operations, and measurement. So these would be the big ideas in math. And I did poll some early childhood educators on what they were most concerned about coming back to school after the pandemic and a number of months of remote instruction. And they were concerned about number sense. They were concerned about word problems. And then they were concerned about executive function. And so executive function skills are another piece that we're going to talk about today. Can students focus? Can they pay attention? Can they follow directions? Can they remember what they're learning? And I have some strategies here for helping with executive function, and then we're going to take those and kind of apply them to some math. So for instance, using a timer for sessions, keeping instructional sessions brief to start, maybe 10 to 12 minutes. Have students record if they're doing what they were supposed to be. Build some physical activity into the day, some outdoor free play. Keeping directions to 3 or less. Playing some memory games like Simon Says or I Spy or Red Light, Green Light. And then just slowing down the pace of transition so there's time to clean up and move. Kind of, again, that slow, smooth, calm. Using some deep breathing to help kids calm down before starting a task. I often use to take a breath in, count to 4, then let it out to just kind of help you focus. And breaking tasks into chunks. So those are some strategies for helping with executive function skills. Now we're also going to build those through some math tasks. So when I was thinking about this session, I was thinking, okay, as a teacher, how would I begin? How would I begin in my kindergarten classroom or my second grade? How would I begin? And I thought that perhaps for the first few weeks, rather than jumping right into Engage New York and focusing on the modules and the lessons, that I'd spend a few weeks just focusing in on math games and fun and interesting math problems. So I gave you the site there, U Cubed. This is Joe Baller's site. And it has a whole lot of interesting math problems and tasks on it that will get kids hopefully interested in math and get them to focus on a task, and a task that's not on a screen. So we're not talking here, even with the math games, I'm not talking about playing IXL or Zern or MobyMax or any of that. I'm talking about games that happen off the screen. Getting them to talk with other children, whether that's through the game or trying to solve the problem, so that they're talking to each other, they're taking turns, getting them to sustain their attention on the task, and games in particular soothe anxiety. So I'm thinking about, like a child in first or second grade has really had little experience in school, in a classroom with 25 other kids. They might have had some preschool and kindergarten, but for, the last year, even if they were going to school, it may be in a hybrid So there were, maybe 6 kids in school while the rest were on Zoom. So helping them to deal with the environment with all these kids, soothing their anxiety. So focusing on math games and fun, interesting math problems. And again, that website's ucubed.org. And I'm going to show you a problem. This is one of the problems on the ucubed site. And it actually, it talks about 2 scoop ice cream cones, like figuring it out with 3 flavors, 4 flavors, 10 flavors, N flavors. So we're just going to try it today. How many kinds of 2 scoop cone combinations are there if there are 3 flavors? So try solving that, and you can put your answers in the chat. Okay, it looks like we're pretty consistent, 6 combinations. And when you look at this task on Joe Baller's site, she talks about, on ucubed.org, she talks about having the kids make posters to explain their answers. So if we were to say have vanilla as a flavor, whoops, sorry about that. Let's go back. Get the pen writing. Vanilla, chocolate. Now we want to get to 3 flavors. I did strawberry. So then we would have vanilla, vanilla, vanilla chocolate, vanilla strawberry. Then you would have chocolate, chocolate, chocolate strawberry, strawberry, strawberry. So I kind of made a little chart there. I didn't do vanilla chocolate. I didn't do like chocolate vanilla here because this one and this one are the same. So we don't need it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 combinations. So you can see that you could take a problem like this, and younger children, 3 flavors, they could draw the pictures. Older children, maybe 5 flavors, 10 flavors, see if they can come up with some kind of equation for any number of flavors. So interesting problems like this, often they'd work well too if you start the class with something like this and you get the kids in groups and then they're working on it and they're making their posters. Instead of, jumping into the curriculum, doing more of this kind of stuff. Now let's talk a little bit about games. Now I have a couple of websites here and I have those up because I think that if you start by using a lot of games, you're going to have to explain your reasons why. So there's a site at Scholastic which talks about the benefits of board games. I'm going to share that with you. Sorry, it's taking me a while to get there. There it is. Can you see it? It's okay. All right. So I would have kids playing all different kinds of board games. And this would get them working together, talking to each other, problem solving. So there you can read some of the benefits. There's that focus. So I don't know if anybody went to the Doug Fisher talk, and he talked about homework, and he said the only homework basically should be preview or review, and he recommended reading. I messaged him and said, add games to your recommendation. Let kids play games. So there's the Scholastic. And then I'm going to share with you a site that talks about card games. And then I'll go back to the PowerPoint. So you should be looking at 23 math card games that turn students into aces. And that's on weareteachers.com. And there's a whole bunch of them. Right? So those are two sites. And we're back to the PowerPoint. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about some of the different games there. So I have up Yahtzee and Sorry, things like Twister. So you can alter some of the rules to that. So I'm thinking of something like Sorry. I know that when you're moving around the board, if you draw the card 7, you can split it up and you can do 2 for one piece and 5 for another. So you can let them do that for any number. And now you're doing things like number bonds. But they're doing that while playing the game. Yahtzee, you can eliminate some of the more complicated rolls like rolling a full house and focus in on rolling how many 2s, how many 3s, how many 4s. You can change something like Guess Who. Maybe not Guess Who. Let me do headbands first. You can change something like headbands where they have objects on their head and have them put numbers up there. And then the kids have to give clues to help the person figure out what number they have. Card game wise, most people are familiar with just playing like War. And of course, in school, they don't necessarily want to call it that. So Everyday Math called it Top It, which is what I use with kids. And that's, you know, just flipping cards and the high card wins. But you can do 2 digits and 3 digits. You can have them add them together. A lot of times when I'm doing card games like this, I take the face cards out. And sometimes I even take the 10s out so that I'm working just with the numbers 1 through 9. They can also set them up like fractions. Playing Go Fish is one of my favorites because you can play with young children and just get them to match. Like the card in my hand is a 7, I'm going to ask for a 7. So we're just learning how to identify the numbers. And of course, if they don't know what number it is, they can count the symbols on the card. But you can also play Go Fish where they need to make tens. So if the child has an 8 in their hand, they don't ask for an 8, they ask for a 2. Okay. And then if you don't have the 2, you know, go fish, and you keep playing that way. So I think that's a fun game. They can be in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. Have a good time with that. And then there's some race to 100 games. I have a picture on the next slide that I think will help make all of this a little more clear. So there's some of the games. Like I said, headbands here, they have like fruit on their head. You know, I am a light bulb, I am a banana. But you can have them say, put up a card. I am a 5, and the other kids would be saying things like, well, you're 2 plus 3, or you're 7 minus 2. And then the child has to guess what number they're at. And then there's of course, sorry. Guess who is great just for asking questions, you know, things like yes, no type questions to uncover something. And then there's Yahtzee, Twister, just even the whole idea of rights and lefts are good. So on the side here are the cards. And I want to just show you for race to 100, what they do is they lay out 2 cards. So like this, and use that as a 2-digit number. So there we have 41. And then they draw 2 more cards, put out that number, and they try to create 2 numbers that will get them as close to 100 as possible. So in this case, we have 41 plus 59, and we are in fact at 100. Doesn't always come out 100. And they quickly learn when playing this that it's a good idea if the tens place are close to each other, like you want 40 and 50, okay? And you want to think too about whether or not you need a trade. So a trade in the ones place. And so they keep doing that to try to get to 100. That's also fun because they can play by themselves, or they can work with a partner or in a group and see who got the closest. Lot better than a worksheet, problem set. When you're doing this with fractions, like to play fraction top it, I usually have the students just put like a pencil here. And so these would be 2 students playing, and one would have 4/5, and then the other has 1/9, and then they have to decide who has the most. Okay, so who has more, who wins. And asking them while they're playing, how do you know, or how did you figure that out? Just from working with kids, they'll often say things like, this is closer to a hole. Okay, I only need 1 more piece to get to a hole. I only have 1 here, and the 1 piece I have is small because 9ths are smaller than 5ths. So you can see that you can get a lot of math out of that, and they're just basically playing top it with cards. I also think cards are an easy thing to get a hold of. You can ask parents to send a deck of cards in with their child, and now you've got more than enough for your classroom to use.
Yeah, hi, Diane. Anne had a comment in the chat about another game.
Sure, go ahead, Anne.
I just typed some games that I've played before. I'm sure you've seen, you know, everybody plays Uno. Now they have Dos. And so it's kids play by adding numbers together, similar to what you had preferenced before that. And then I don't know if anybody's ever played Blocus, I think they call it. That's spatial relationships. That's so fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of math games out there. They're addictive.
Yes, and they're engaging and they're exciting. And you can get a lot of even assessment data just by watching kids play and asking questions. So much better than a paper and pencil assessment, especially as we come back to school after COVID. Thanks for sharing. Okay, the next piece I have up with is block play. And this is really good for kids too. There's a lot of problem solving, planning, measuring. I mean, even while kids are playing with the blocks, you can ask them things like, well, which block is the longest? Which two colors are the same size? So there's a lot of things that you can do there. And I put up NAEYC's site, 10 things children learn during block play. And I'm not going to take us to that site, but there's another place where if somebody was to ask you, why do you have this block center going on? You have a resource to share. You know, this is what the kids are learning while playing with blocks, while in the block corner. And of course, that's in addition to the executive function things of taking turns and talking with other people and sustaining their attention, and even just cleaning up, putting things away and getting ready to transition. Puzzles are another one. I always had a jigsaw puzzle in the back of my classroom, and that's what I used. You know how when kids finish early, they could go back and work on the puzzle. So I think that's a great thing for kids, and you can find them at all different levels. Even Sudokus, easier Sudokus are fine for kids. And then I put up the game Rush Hour, which is really more of a puzzle. And it's kind of the idea, I can't remember which car it is that you have to try to get out of the traffic jam, but you have to move the other ones in order to get that one to get out of the traffic jam, get out off the board. And there are cards here. I think there's easy, intermediate, more difficult. So, you know, you can certainly do the easier ones with younger children. So these are all things that you can have going on in your classroom. And I would probably put them in centers. And this is how I would start my year, just teaching kids how to work together in centers. I'd have flexible groups, maybe 3 to 5 students. I'd use a timer so that they are focused. I have 12 minutes to play and 3 minutes to clean up and move, but I know 12 minutes might not be long enough for some games and things, so you might need to go longer. And then, of course, if you're going to do centers, you got to teach the children how to play at each center. You can't assume they know every card game, you know, board game. So you need to do that. And you also need to teach them and model cleanup and movement, you know, using a signal, something that tells them to clean up, and then something that tells them to move to the next center. So what to do while they're playing? So I see this as the opportunity for us to do some formative assessment without over assessing children. NCTM, I think I mentioned it on the next slide, but NCTM is very concerned about over assessment in mathematics because of the pandemic. So they're concerned there will be a lot of kids doing electronic tests and paper and pencil tests because we have to find where their gaps are. And that's not what the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics is recommending. What they really want is teachers to teach grade level material and then to work with students on any gaps they have, but build on their strengths. So what I'm thinking is they're playing, you can get some formative assessment data. So I would walk around, observe, make notes. What do you see? What do you hear? Are children counting on their fingers? Which, by the way, is great. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. Okay. Can they subitize? When they're rolling the dice, are they counting every dot, or do they know that's 5, that's 6, that's 2? Can they count on? So if they roll 2 dice to play a game and they have a 3 and a 4, do they go 4, 5, 6, 7 instead of counting every little dot? Can they strategize? Can they make a plan? Let's say they sit down to do the puzzle and they say, let's find all the corner pieces first. Okay, so looking for things like that. Can they take turns? You know, do they want to control everything, or can they wait their turn? Can they finish the game? You know, like, is it one of those things where if it's not going their way, they quit? So, we want to see if they can sustain that attention and stay in there. And then whatever math skills we observe, are they counting? Are they skip counting? Are they, able to make tens? Can they talk about, I have the higher number and this is why? And while you're observing and you're making notes, you can ask questions, but try not to scaffold, try not to teach. Okay, so really think about just asking. Smith and Stein talk about assessing questions, such as, why did you do that? Why did you choose that strategy? How did you know that would work? Would it work all the time? Okay, so asking questions like that, but not saying, do this or try this, because you're really looking to see what they know. And I want to show you a couple of different ways that you can record this. So one of the things you can do is just use index cards. I'm like a huge index card fan, and I just write notes. Anybody who's in class with me knows my magic index cards. They get called on randomly and I make notations on them. So you can use something like that, put them on a clipboard. You can create a rubric and put a math concept on it, such as counting on, counting back, and then record the names of the students. And while you're observing, seeing whether or not they can do that. Are they on target? Are they above and beyond? Are they not there yet? You can create a checklist and put student names at the top and then check off. Oh, I saw them counting on. Oh, I saw them subitizing. Oh, I saw that they could compare numbers, whatever math concepts you're looking at. And here's just some samples to look at. These math skills are probably above what we're talking about in terms of content, because one of them is fractions and area models, and the other's talking about mental computation. But you can kind of get the idea of what you can do. I remember when I had my own classroom. So every month I'd run off probably about 50 of these blank, like it would just have the student names like this. And then I would fill in everything I needed in the checklist so that I could keep them and have some data. And I'm not necessarily saying this is data for report cards or something like that, but this is formative assessment data so that you can plan instruction. This would be a checklist that would be more about executive function. And so I might be using something like this, but I'd want some notes with it. I'd probably put another column in, put comments. So that if, for instance, I said there was organization, the child was using organization skills, I'd want to know what I observed. Impulse control. What did I observe? They were taking turns. They were waiting until it was their turn, even though they were anxious to play a card or to ask for something. I'm thinking of this, like if you're playing Go Fish and the child holds an 8 in their hand and somebody else asks another child for an 8, some of the kids will know, oh, that kid has a 2 in their hand, and so they just can't wait to take their turn because they know they've got a match. So it might be something like that I would record. Okay, so now I've got my data, I've got the kids working in centers. I can do something else while they're working. I can do interviews, kind of like what Dr. Clements mentioned, clinical interviews. I can have the kids come and sit down with me, solve a problem. I can ask them questions, and then I can make groupings based on the interview. Of course, temporary and flexible. And again, doing this should be to avoid over assessing kids. I'd probably try to keep an interview to, less than 10 minutes. And I don't want to think just about weaknesses. I want to think about strengths too. I want to make sure that I'm looking at what children can do, not just what they're struggling with. So I'm going to show you a sample on the next slide. So what I did was I went into Engage New York, grade 1, first module. And there's this, the word problem there. Dora found 5 leaves that blew in through the window. Then she found 2 more leaves that blew in. Draw a picture and use numbers to show how many leaves Dora found in all. So here I'm give the problem to the child, read it. I'm not going to teach, but I'm going to have them try to solve it and show me what they did. And then I can record. What did they draw? Did they count on their fingers? Did they count on? Did they simply look at me and say, Dora has 7 leaves? Well, how did you know she had 7 leaves? Like I can ask questions. And so I can do interviews like this while the children are playing and working in centers. Of course, once you have those behaviors and routines established. And if I have children solve this, I can then decide, do I need to do this module or are we okay? Can I skip some things in this module? Do I have some students that need more work? And so maybe I'm going to work with them in a small group. So I'm getting more formative assessment data. So again, the early childhood teachers I talked to, you know, they're concerned about finding the students' strengths and finding where they might be struggling. An interview is a good way to do that. And then we're not giving tests and we're not sitting on IXL. We're really talking to kids. So there, I've got that from your data. You can build small group lessons, whole group lessons, decide what you might be able to skip so that you can spend more time on something else. Couple of things about finding gaps. I think Doug Fisher mentioned that there were some states that are saying any content from the previous year, the parents have to teach at home while the teacher does. Yeah, I know, Anne. I can see you shaking your head and I'm going down this road to say, don't do that. That's ridiculous. The same would be true here. If you find a gap, try to use a center or small group instruction to fill it, not worksheets, not morning work, and absolutely not homework. Okay, one of the things I think we think is that there always has to be math homework and it has to look like a worksheet. If you're going to give kids homework, you can give things like take a walk with your parents and count how many dogs you see. You know, you can give them tasks like that. You know, you have to, I think young children spend a lot of time today riding around in the back seat of their parents' car. So ask them, when you pull up to a stoplight, find the numbers on the license plate. Rearrange those numbers to make the biggest number possible. Add those numbers up. What do you get? You can give them things like that to do, which they can do with their parent while, you know, driving around. We have to go to Target and then we have to go to Wegmans and then we have to drop off Big Brother at basketball practice. Things like that instead of things like this. I think Doug Fisher called them shut up sheets, which I don't know if I like that term, but we don't need to do them. And they certainly don't need to go home as homework. And I also don't think we send home homework that a child is struggling with and then expect the parent to do the re-engagement lesson. The re-engagement lesson is the teacher's job. Give them something to do at home. You know, they can play card games at home with their parents too. Anything like that. And then, of course, if you're doing these interviews and you're keeping your data, find the strengths. Kids did learn during the pandemic. I think they probably learned a lot of math. I know a lot of families during the pandemic did a lot of cooking and baking, and you can't cook and bake and not talk about measurement and fractions. So there are things that they gained, find them and build on them. Okay, a couple of other things that might help you. Children's literature. So depending on the age, they could read on their own or you can read aloud. And I would do a lot of this in the beginning too, because again, then they can work on sitting still, listening, attending. You can make note of what you see and what you hear as they talk about the story, as they talk about the math. And I love these questions. I particularly love these questions because they do get at problem solving, but they are also common questions you use when teaching ELA. Who's the story about? What's the problem? How did they solve it? And in a lot of times we get hung up on, we have to use a book that's about math, you know, like Swimmy the Shark Learns Subtraction, but every book has problem solving in it. And don't worry so much about numbers. Get them to talk about the scenario in there. That will help them with solving word problems. The Erickson Institute has a video on it where a teacher is teaching word problems and the word problems have no numbers. So the kids just simply talk about things like, you have to put the cats and dogs together. Oh, what's putting together? Oh, that's adding. And there are no numbers in the word problem. So they're learning the scenario. They're also, never ever do this, teach keywords. No, no. If you're reading stories and you're talking about the scenarios, you're not doing that. Okay, so we don't use keywords to teach children to solve word problems. Children's literature is a great way to get kids talking about math situations. I'm going to give you a list of books on the next page. And then I'm going to talk in particular about equal shmequal, which I love. It's my new latest fave in children's literature for developing math concepts. So I bet you can guess a little bit about what goes on in the book Equal Shmequal. We have some animals and they're going to try to play tug of war. And they realize that they need to make it fair. They need to have it be equal, same on both sides. And then they also end up doing it with, you can kind of see the picture here of the animals and the like seesaw. And one of the reasons I like this book is that a lot of young children think the equal sign is like, here's the magic, and then we get the answer. And in this book, it's more like, you know, 4 rabbits plus 1 fox is the same as, I don't know, 2 raccoons plus 3 mice. Okay, so they're not about some kind of magic happening. The equal sign is really about things being the same, and not the same like this, but some combination that's the same. And so a few times in the book, it's not equal. You know, like they put the bear and the fox and the, I don't know, the rabbit on one side and a mouse and some bees on the other side. Not equal. But it's a great book for getting at that. And of course, you can talk to the kids. What's the problem on this page? It's not the same. What do you mean it's not the same? It's not the same on both sides. If something needs to be equal, it's the same on both sides. Then when they start to see something like this, they know what that equal sign means. It doesn't mean something happens. It means that what's over here is the same quantity as what's over here. So they could even do things like this. Oh, wrong number. Ha. That was not equal. Okay. So that's just one book, and there are hundreds of children's books that have math undertones, math concepts in them. And they don't have to be like, the math doesn't have to be, what's the word I want? It doesn't have to be in the title. It's still a story. There's still some characters with a problem. So there's some titles there for you, but you could Google and find 100 more. Here's some other resources for you, some books that I used. Building Thinking Classrooms. I like that one because Peter actually takes what is a typical math problem and turns it into something that's a little more open-ended, that requires more thinking. So that might be helpful if you're looking for more problems or tasks like you could find on YouCubed. Productive Math Struggle. I know someone put something in the chat about wanting to teach with this. And this is so important, that kids learn that math is challenging and that that's a good thing, and that they'll grow and they'll learn, and that it's perfectly fine to use different strategies. I also think it's important. I know teacher candidates will often say this, and some kids will say this: I'm not a math person. Like, we're all math people. And so this Productive Math Struggle book gives you some strategies for how to really tap into that to develop conceptual understanding in math. And I like the 5 Practices book by Smith and Stein, because they talk about what kinds of questions to ask, how to facilitate a discussion when you ask a child to explain their answer, to explain their reasoning. So those are a couple of resources. And then the Erickson Institute, the early math section on the Erickson Institute has a lot of resources. And that's where that video is, where the teacher is teaching about word problems without any numbers in them, really teaching kids problem solving. So that's earlymath.erickson.edu. So we're kind of getting close to the end of our time today. And you're like, wow, that was a lot. Okay, what am I supposed to do? So this is what I'd like you to do over the next month. Choose something. And this should probably say choose one thing. So maybe it's, I'm going to incorporate card games in my centers. Okay. I'm going to put children's literature in my lessons. I'm going to use tasks that are open-ended at the beginning. I'm going to keep some assessment data from what I observe when kids are playing. So choose something and try it. Try it over the next month, because we're going to get together in October again. And I want you to keep a journal and note challenges and successes. Now, I know teachers like, yeah, I have time to journal. If I had time to journal. But it could be some sticky notes you throw in your planner. Okay. I mentioned index cards before. Maybe it's the index card that says, wow, that math game worked, or that book was really good. I want to encourage you not to throw the idea out if it didn't work the first time. You might have to tweak things and try again, tweak things and try again. And keep trying at that, whatever you choose for the month. Stay calm, smooth, and steady. I put up the little namaste, because what we don't want to do as we start this school year is panic. You know, if you're teaching 2nd grade and you have a child ask you what 11 is, don't panic. Show them what 11 is. Okay, smooth, steady, calm. And then when we get back together next month, we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about what works and what doesn't work, what helped and what didn't help. And there's our next session, Tuesday, October 5th from 4 to 5. And then right now, I'd like to just open it up and see if anyone has any questions, if there's anything in the chat to talk about. Yes, someone mentioned Greg Tang. Greg Tang, excellent stuff you can find there. So there's some good resources in there. I sometimes think children aren't intimidated by word problems, adults are. And then we're intimidated about trying to teach a child how to solve a word problem. I think there's so many things that we could just ask kids and we would find that they do fine. Drawing pictures helps too, but maybe that's something for the next session. Anybody else questions? Anything you want to know? Yeah, I agree, Bob. Math interviews so much better than, a paper and pencil test.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. McCarthy. That was really informative and really engaging. And we appreciate you. And we hope that you will, let me just put it in the chat right now, complete the session evaluation. We really appreciate your feedback. And we hope that you come to some follow-up sessions this fall, because we know that PD, professional development, is always best when it's sustained over time and not just kind of a one-shot deal. So that's what we're aiming for with all hands on deck. If we don't see you tomorrow for our final session, we have these 2 weeks of all our full sessions, not follow-up sessions. We hope you have a great start to your school year. And thanks so much for attending. And thank you, Dr. McCarthy.
Yes. Thanks so much for coming.